My name is Mohammed Rabbani. I'm the International Director at a legal rights organization called CAGE. We're based in London. CAGE's function is primarily two things. One is really to create debates about how the rule of law needs to be protected within the context of national security policies. And secondly is to empower communities that have been impacted by those policies. Originally, it was due to the gross violations that were taking place at Guantanamo Bay prison camp. So when those men were being hooded and shackled and taken there completely outside of any legal process, they were being tortured, they were being detained arbitrarily. So Cage's original mission was to try and draw attention to this and to remind the world that you mustn't suspend or abandon these due process norms. And then what we realized was the logic that was underlying Guantanamo Bay prison camp was actually being applied in other areas as well. So we saw, for example, drone strikes being implemented in the Obama era, especially, but also George Bush. So we started working on that, documenting all of those, drawing attention to how extrajudicial killing is actually worse than extrajudicial detention. And then we saw the same logic being applied to other secret prison sites, which nobody knew about. Cage went about documenting those, investigating based on testimonies of survivors who'd emerged from these secret prisons all over the world. We were actually the first organization to put together a list of 100 secret detention facilities all over the world. We saw the same logic then also permeating domestic policies in the West. So laws that were being developed on the premise that when it comes to the fight against terrorism, a person, invariably Muslim, is assumed guilty until he can be proven innocent. I found myself in a dilemma last November when I was being questioned and interrogated by counterterrorism police at the border of UK. And the dilemma was they were forcing me to give up my passwords to my devices. And I was explaining to them that I can't do that because I have been entrusted with information which is sensitive. In fact, it is part of legal proceedings that we will be bringing in 2 or 3 jurisdictions, and it's related to a survivor of torture. So I was trying to reason with the police officers at the time that if you allow me to obtain consent from this particular individual, and also from the various other people who've entrusted their very confidential and legal matters to us, then I'll give you my password. But the police were determined to actually just seize my devices and get the passwords out of me. So they threatened me with arrest. And I couldn't breach the trust, you see. So I didn't give my passwords, and obviously I got arrested. A few months later, I was charged. And this Monday, which is the 25th of September, I will be standing trial where I will be defending and pleading my innocence in front of court. And I'm very, very confident, inshallah, that the court will also agree with me that any person who is in my position, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a psychiatrist, whether it's even a banker who has in their possession information related to other people, which is private, they wouldn't surrender their passwords. They'd have to get permission from those other people. And this will then hopefully open up a conversation which is very, very much needed. And that conversation is about the existence of a power like Schedule 7, which operates on a totally suspicionless basis. And these are really deep and uncomfortable questions that need to be asked. How can we be in a society where the normalization of suspicion against a whole section of the people is legalized? I mean, through the law. I have unfortunately been stopped on many occasions, and on previous occasions I have been asked as well. On those occasions, I have reasoned with the police, and they have been very understanding, and they've given my devices back. On this particular occasion, I really don't know the answer. I can only speculate. But what I can say is it's now been maybe, 9-10 months since I've been without my devices. And this is hampering a live investigation into torture abuse. The torture abuse was in America. And we have evidence in our possession which could implicate named American officials, um, American agents, named agents, which means, there's some possibility of seeking accountability through the judicial system for this poor man who was tortured for 14 years. They are implicated, and there will be, of course, adverse effects on them. Right. And also, in this particular stop, I wasn't asked any other question. The only question was really, I mean, there were some other small questions, but in all of 4 hours, I was only really asked one question, passwords, and they were just determined to get my devices. Don't believe in the conspiratorial mindset. And when I'm very sort of conscious that our community, the communities that are being impacted by a lot of these things, um, we need to play the role of empowering people. And conspiracies don't empower people; they actually remove agency, and people sort of content themselves thinking that there's some superpower behind all of this and orchestrating everything. Clearly, there is a case to be heard about government interference in the work of human rights defenders who are trying to defend torture victims. The implications for me are potentially a 3-month prison sentence. That's the maximum that can be applied. If it gets any worse from that, we'll be speculating, but the police have threatened where the consequences are far greater. There's like a 5-year sentence attached to that. The implications for the state of the rule of law, the state of due process rights, I think are very, very far-reaching. Also, the implications for privacy rights, digital rights. There's a lot of ramifications. If in my case, inshallah, I'm acquitted, then it would mean that there should not be any power that automatically allows police officers or any authority to gain access to your private devices, which basically is all of your private and professional life, all of it, without a warrant, without some sort of formal accusation against you. And currently, that's not the case. Currently, all those people being stopped at UK borders, they can just gain access to all of your devices. So that's the sort of broader implication. And then I think one sort of level higher is about what is the relationship between citizen and state? How should that actually work? Should the state have such invasive powers, all in the name of fighting terrorism, but at the cost of, doing away with all these liberties and rights and freedoms? So that's a more deeper and longer lasting conversation. We've received a lot of support, overwhelming support from the Muslim community itself. I think they recognize and they can relate to what's happening. Remember, 50,000 people each year are affected by this. There's not a small number. That means lots of people are affected. So when they see somebody who's sort of taking a stand, there's a lot of sympathy and goodwill. I mean, I've invited people to attend my trial. I've got more than 100 people already registered to attend. And I think that only 25 people can be there. I must say I'm a little bit disappointed with other sections of society, but I have hope, and I'm referring to human rights advocates and privacy campaigners. I think they are making calculated decision, and I think because the climate is such that if you stand next to a Muslim who's got a beard and who's accused of terrorism, even though there's no violence involved in this accusation, that's a little bit too uncomfortable for them. My expectation is that if you're going to work for a set of principles, whether they're human rights or civil liberties, or even the rule of law generally, you would uphold these principles in all situations for all people, and especially for the people that are marginalized, that are excluded, that are on the fringes. Okay, if you have an organization, then you have a mandate. And your job is to implement that based on that mandate, and you should not exclude any people. Okay? Human rights are for humans. They're not for some humans and not for others. They're for all humans. And I think we're on a journey, and I think our colleagues and others who are from those human rights communities, they will eventually see the error in their ways, and they'll find the courage to stand on the basis of principle and not political expediency. The future for me, I'm going to take it one step at a time. One thing's for sure, this is not a vocation. This is not a profession even. We're not here doing a 9 to 5 job. This is us on a journey, and that journey is one of um, you know trying to protect rights, seeking accountability, and empowering our communities. So I'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm just focusing on the trial right now and to see what the outcome is. But I believe there'll be more to come, and I think I'm actually quite excited about the future. I think there is a real shift happening. I think what's happened with the Trump election, people have really seen the reality. What Trump has done is actually given a face and a voice to that reality that was always there. So I'm actually very, very positive. Although there's all that negativity around, I think we are in a phase where we're turning a corner, and a lot of people are realizing and waking up. Thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you and your organization all the best.